Brad Holmes, let's lock in on this, fellas. I have some questions because obviously he did not make moves on the trade deadline. But there are some free agents. The Raiders have cut a few guys. There are guys that are starting to open up a little bit that are hopping on waivers to where if they drop to the Lions, they're going to have a chance to get them. And, Broder, this is the biggest thing to me that I kind of want to get to you because I have a little bit of a statement in regards to it, but I want to get your feelings first. Do you believe, and it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be any of these 3 or 4 guys I put on the prep. Do you believe Brad Holmes needs to go out there and make one more move before the end of this season? At least to make a push in the playoffs.
I don't think he needs to make a playoff push, but I'm going to say he needs to. I'm going to say he needs to. Like, I do think they need to add something to be serious contenders, to really believe going into the playoffs that they have what it takes to win a Super Bowl, to make it to the Super Bowl and then win it. I worry about the depth. I worry about the depth of the cornerback room, and I worry about the strength of the defensive line. And maybe that is also depth, but we got to see what Bruce Irvin and James Houston can do for this team. But that defensive line is my biggest worry. It actually makes me worry more about the secondary because of their weaknesses.
Yeah, and that was my biggest thing is I truly, like, the one thing, and I believe that they need to do is go get a corner. And there's been some corners that Shaquille Griffin, Marcus Peters, and I think there's been a couple other guys too that are out there, and still some free agents that haven't played this year. I think that are sitting out there to where maybe you just get a depth guy, because at the end of the day, what happens, and I'm not going to, what happens if you lose Cam Sutton or Jerry Jacobs?
Exactly.
Like, that is a disaster. I heard the morning show say, what happens if Cam Sutton goes down? What do you have? What's his name that fit, like Stephen Gilmore? I don't know who they've been even.
No,
like,
you probably put Brian Branch.
Maybe. I don't know.
That's where it gets
because Will Harris was bad when he was out there, and yes, he filled in a little bit, but like at the end of that second game that he filled in for Jerry Jacobs, I think it was like even Dan Campbell, you saw the kind of playing time get taken away because he struggled so much.
Yeah,
and it's like if that happens again, you're in a bad spot.
That's why Jerry Jacobs as your number 3 is so crucial, because especially in the role as the 3, he plays bigger, he plays tougher. He knows his role. He's got to come in and do what he does. At the number 2, it changes things. Even Cam Sutton, who I'm a huge fan of, and for a lot of this season, I'd say he was playing like a number 1. He might not actually be a number, like on a Super Bowl winning team, he might have to be your number 2. And I think that's why they went and got Emmanuel Mosley. Or if not a number 2, it's a 1A and a 1B. Just 2 guys that can be that I don't want to say dominant, but that strong at the cornerback position. And then you bring a dog like Jerry Jacobs off like that. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, like bringing Jerry Jacobs and Tracy Walker off your bench. That's elite. That is an elite secondary. Having those guys start, and it's nothing against them; they're great players, but that's not an elite secondary anymore. It could be a good one, but then you have no depth. So the secondary as a whole, that's where I start to have issues. Like, what happens?
That's what you have to think about. And yesterday we kind of went at it a little bit with Nick, where Nick was like, well, like Brad didn't really sign great guys. But it's like, if you do put it in perspective, if guys didn't get hurt, like his vision, I think was there. To where you have Emmanuel Mosley, you have a Jerry Jacobs who's been playing CB2 for you all year long. And you're 8-3 with him at corner 2. Like, that's huge at the end of the day. So you were expecting him to be your 3rd corner. Yeah. You were expecting to have Emmanuel Mosley. You weren't expecting to have to go Brian Branch Foley, which he ended up earning that spot.
Yeah.
But you weren't expecting to have to go Tracy Walker at that starting spot because you had C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So I think when you start looking at this, okay, things change, and I think that's where it comes with Brad. And I get where people were really mad at the trade deadline when they saw the 49ers make moves. They saw the Seahawks make moves. You see the who else? The Eagles make moves, and you're like, okay, well, the Lions are in this level of play right now. Why didn't they make the moves that we thought they would?
Yeah.
That's where, to me, it's like, okay, Brad, you kind of have a little bit of a second wind right now to where you have a lot of guys getting cut. You have some free agents still left on the board that you might be able to go snag. Even if it's not, like, you're not going to get a guy that's going to be a starter. No. You're not going to go get a Chase Young. But you can get someone that's going to produce, that's going to give you a little bit of a oomph. You know? Yeah. And that's where I'm kind of looking at with Brad Holmes in this situation here is I want you to go out and chase after a Shaq, maybe even a Shaq Leonard, depending on Angelo's injury, a Marcus Peters. Go chase after someone and say, just make an effort. You're basically what? You get a rental and you keep him for a year? And I think that's it. And E-Fog said it best in the chat here a little bit ago. He said depth can't hurt. That's the biggest thing. Is especially if you're on getting a rental guy, depth cannot hurt. When you have injuries, as many injuries and as many guys on that defense that have gone down, three of your starters have gone on the IR this year on the Detroit Lions on defense. And they added Bruce Irvin to make up for it. That is a problem at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. As you had 3 starters on your defense go on IR, and all you added was Bruce Irvin. So that's where I think, okay, if a Marcus Peters becomes available and you need a rental, that's a guy you should be trying to get for the playoffs. Because you lost 3 starters on defense this year. That's an issue. Again, I'm going to keep saying, like, that's crazy.
I agree with you.
And that's the drop-off.
Were you trying to convince me yesterday Marcus Peters is, like, not the type of player you want in?
No, that was not. No, someone has mentioned that on one of the shows here.
Was it Lucas?
It might have been Lucas a little bit, and then you mentioned the Jared Goff things with him. Me, I was saying, no, Marcus Peters. The reason the reason people are saying he's bad and they don't want him is because of his issues in Vegas. Everyone had issues in Vegas.
That's a good point.
The organization had issues from top to bottom. So
you know where Marcus Peters didn't have issues?
In LA.
In Ford Field.
In Ford Field, yeah.
Pick six.
So that's where I'm like, okay, I trust, like, if Marcus Peters comes in, I trust that. Because he's going from a terrible organization at the time to the Detroit Lions, where it has a culture that's built.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
And Shaquille Griffin, I know he's maybe just past his prime, but he didn't get cut because of horrible play in Houston. That secondary got healthy. Like, Derek Stingley has been playing really well, so there were just not enough snaps for him. So that, depending on what kind of money he likes, that might be a guy to go after. And just real quick to defend, you said Nick was talking about Brad Holmes and his plan yesterday. I can never say a bad thing about Brad Holmes, but there is a risk when you sign your expected starting cornerback has a torn ACL. There's risk associated with that, and the risk happened.
That was my point yesterday.
Yeah, that one, yes.
And you can't just go on. You had to pick up somebody at the trade deadline, and we did not. That's what I was getting on Brad Holmes about, because he obviously wasn't coming back. We knew that after, I believe, week 3 when he was supposed to. Played 1 snap, never came back. We never addressed it via the trade. That was my only critique on Brad Holmes.
That's what I do. Fair. Yeah, that's what I do think. He's probably going to go get a cornerback. I believe he's going to get a cornerback because that was his plan at the beginning of the season. Like, he knew they needed another piece. Even while planning to have C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Brian Branch and whatnot, he went out and got Emmanuel Mosley because he needed another cornerback.
If you're a playoff team and you have multiple guys on one side of the ball get hurt, when the trade deadline comes up, you do expect something to be addressed.